Thank you so much for making time for me.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Could you please start by telling me a little about yourself and about your books?
Sure. So my name is Mo O'Hara, and I write kids' books, everything from picture books for preschoolers up to kind of kids about 10 or 11. The current book that I have out is Agent and Moose, which is a graphic novel. I hadn't written graphic novels before. I'd written picture books and I'd written fiction books. So this is really fun for me. And I get to work with the wonderful Jess Bradley, who's the illustrator on this. So that's my current. I've been writing for about 12 years, maybe, I guess. It's all a blur. It's all a blur now.
What drew you to writing for children?
I think I was always the kind of person that if I went to a party and there were a lot of people talking about, house prices and things, I would be talking to the kid about Star Wars in the house. So that was kind of always me. I think a lot of my mindset has always just kind of stayed in that zone. And I was an actor before I was a writer, and I used to do a lot of children's theater. And I loved the honesty of kids. I love the fact that kids won't laugh to be polite. Kids won't laugh to like make you feel better, or they won't go, oh, that was clever. That's great. They laugh if it genuinely makes them laugh. And if it doesn't, they'll just go, uh-huh. So I like that it's a really honest interpretation. So when I wrote for that, I felt really good. If I got that laugh out of the 9-year-old, I was like, okay, I got the laugh. so yeah, I think I always felt comfortable. That's where my voice was.
Where did the idea for a zombie goldfish come from?
Well, the zombie goldfish actually came from a real life experience, oddly enough. So when my brother and I were little, we had a goldfish and we won this goldfish at a fair. The poor goldfish started off life being, there used to be these games at fairs and stuff. I don't know if it's the same where you grew up, but where I grew up, you would have like, contests at fairs and stuff, dart tosses and balloon tosses. Well, they had one where you had a little ping pong ball and you had to throw it and get it into like a little goldfish bowl. And if you did that, you won the goldfish that was swimming around in there. So my brother and I really, really wanted to win this goldfish. So we threw the ping pong ball, paid our money, threw the ping pong ball, got it in the bowl with the fish. And I always thought it was a bit hard on the fish because he's just swimming around minding his own business and he gets bopped on the head with a ping pong ball for no reason. But I think ping pong balls are pretty light. I don't think they do any lasting concussion or anything for them. And we had that fish for about a year or so. And then one day we came home and the fish had gone belly up. And my brother and I were really upset. And we thought, oh no, what do we have to do? Because we didn't want this to be the end of our fish. And we thought, well, we've got to try to do something to save the fish. And we'd probably seen way too many hospital TV shows where like someone's dying or they look dead. And then these doctors rush in with these paddles attached to a battery and go, clear! And they shock the person. And then the person wakes up and goes, oh, I feel much better. Thank you very much. So we kind of thought, right, well, we could try that with the fish. Surely that must work on fish. So we got the transistor battery from my brother's alarm clock and we laid the fish down on the counter and we shocked the fish. It kind of, and after a couple of times, gently shocking the fish with the battery, the fish woke up, started flapping around. We stuck him back in his bowl, and that fish lived like another year after that. Who knew? Who knew? Now, I don't recommend this to goldfish now. I've since learned more sensible ways of taking care of a goldfish if he starts to have problems. But that happened to me as a kid. And I started thinking, when I was trying to write stories when I was older, that kept coming back to me. And I thought, well, what if when my goldfish, woke up and came back, what if he came back slightly wrong? What if he came back like as a zombie? What if he came back with the power to zombify people to do what he wanted? And I was like, okay, there's a story. So all from the shocking a fish with a battery. And that's that thing that happened to my brother and I is actually in the book. So this is Tom and Pradeep, the two main characters in the book, and they are shocking Frankie back to life with a battery, the same as my brother and I did those many years ago. So it's yeah, it's based on real life.
What do you remember about first meeting with your literary agent, Gemma Cooper?
Oh, so I met with Gemma. So if anyone is interested in writing and getting to be a writer or an illustrator, fantastic group to join is SCBWI. They're international, they're all over the world. I know that there's a branch where you are in Jerusalem, there's branches in the UK and all around the US and Europe. So they are a Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. And I got involved in them, and then I started to volunteer for them. So I had booked speakers for a conference in Winchester in England. And Gemma Cooper, who's an agent, was one of our speakers. She was like on a panel. So there was an evening party, and I was just kind of making sure that all the speakers were okay, that they weren't trapped in a corner talking to someone they didn't want to talk to, and that they had a full glass of wine and that they were happy. And after, a couple of times of, chatting to Gemma and filling up her wine and, steering her towards people that she wanted to talk to or whatever, she finally said to me, "So Mo, what do you write?" And I went, "Oh, well, I've got this idea for a book about a zombie goldfish." And she went, "Yeah, send that to me." Send that to me. That sounds good. I'm actually she was really goldfish obsessed at the time because she had this goldfish that she got when she was in New York. Anyway, so we chatted more and got on very well. And then a couple of days after the conference, I was dealing with after stuff, invoices and blah, blah, blah. And she sent me an email saying, "There are no goldfish swimming in my inbox. Why is that? Why are there no goldfish swimming in my inbox?" And I was like, "Oh, she meant it. She wasn't just being polite." I was like, okay, because I thought, oh, she's just being polite. So I sent it off to her, and she got back to me like that day and said, "Can I see the rest of it?" I sent her like the first 5, and that was it. I met with her, and like I said, we got on really well. And editorially, we really meshed. Like, I liked her sense of humor and how she approached things. And it's been fantastic. We've done so many books together now, so many series. So it was really fate, and just being at the right place at the right time and creating those opportunities, those networking opportunities, which you get in a group like SCBWI. You get that, I'm just going to be in the coffee line next to this editor or this agent, and I'm just going to strike up a conversation about the thing you just talked, the talk you just went to, or the thing you're about to go to, or whatever. And it's it's a nice atmosphere to do that. I miss that. I miss in-person conferences. I want to go back to in-person conferences. But yeah.
Do you brainstorm ideas for new projects with your agent?
Yes. And sometimes that's on purpose. Like, sometimes we'll talk about things and it'll be like, yeah, let's do this. And sometimes it's accidental. So with Agent Moose, Gemma was typing something, and Agent Moose's real name is Anonymous, right? So he's a master of disguise. He's a secret agent called Anonymous. And she was typing this thing, and instead of typing the word anonymous, she typed Anonymous. And she just sent me a quick email saying, "Oh, isn't this funny? Anonymous. Maybe that's a character." And I was like, "Oh yeah, Anonymous. Okay." So I got really into it, and I was like, yes, there's a mouse, and he's a spy, and he can hide anywhere, and he's, and all this stuff. And I wrote a couple of chapters of this book, and it just wasn't funny. Like, it just wasn't very good. The whole idea of the anonymous mouse thing just didn't work. I put it aside in a drawer for a while, and I came back to it. And I was like, it's not funny because a mouse is secret. Like, a mouse could be in this room right now, and I wouldn't know it, right? There's, a mouse could be hiding, listening in on a conversation, and you wouldn't know. But a moose, like a 7-foot brown furry moose who was hiding with a lampshade on his head, that's funny. That's funny. So it turned into Anonymous, and then the whole thing happened. So sometimes it's just like a random conversation with Gemma that can turn into a whole project. Sometimes it's proper brainstorming, like, okay, I have this character, but I don't know what to do with them. Or I really want to set a book like this. Like, I really wanted to write a book about dinosaurs. And Gemma was like, oh, well, mashups are really in. So why don't we try a mashup of things? And so that's how Romeosaurus and Juliet Rex came about, which is Romeo and Juliet with dinosaurs. She's a carnivore, he's a herbivore, star-crossed dinos, it's bound to go wrong. But that was a conversation as well, where we wanted to like take dinosaurs but do something different. So yeah, I think it's really important I guess it's not essential. Some people don't have that relationship with their agent, and it's great. Their agent just does editorial stuff once they've already got an idea, or not even that. Some people's agents just do the management of the contracts and the events and you know what their the client, of personal, you know, managing the person. But I need that. I want that creative person too, to bounce ideas around with it. And I value Gemma's opinion, and I go, oh yeah, well, if she thinks that's funny, that's okay. So yeah, so I really value that in an agent. I think that's important.
What is it like to write a book under contract?
It's, in some ways, it's more pressure because you have a finite amount of time. So a lot of times people find this, like, so their first book they wrote on spec, and they took years to craft it, and they made it, you know, they could take each sentence and go, oh, I'm going to do this. No, maybe I'll do this. So let's explore this. And they could really spend years and years on that first book. And then they get a book deal, and it's like, yeah, and we want book 2 in 6 months. And you suddenly go, I you know, and so that's hard, but that's what the profession is. So you kind of have to, like, you're not just an artist, you're an artisan. So you are, you know, you're not just the person who's making the sculpture. You're the person who was told to make 20 sculptures in that cathedral by next Tuesday. Like that's that, you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. You're the artisan person who's working. You still have to work to a really good standard, but you have to be able to do it in a time frame that suits people. And you have to be honest about that. Like if your lifestyle dictates that you can't do that, then you have to be really honest with your editors and say, you know, I have tiny kids and I don't have the childcare, or I have, you know, this other responsibility or that other responsibility. I can't devote the amount of time this needs. Can we push this back? And then your agent will negotiate, right? Now, maybe we could have, you know, 9 months for this, or maybe we could have whatever, or they could help you in some way or something. So there are ways to do it, but I think you're never going to get as much time as you took on your first book again. So you just kind of have to like accept that and go, but I can do this now because you've done all that work on your first book. You can apply everything you've learned to when you're writing the second book. I think it must be very hard for people that get a contract right away and they've never written a book, because then they've not done that exploratory, or maybe they I don't know. So for me, it was, I wrote the first book, and that took, you know, it had a lot of editorial input from Gemma, and it had a lot of time going through stuff. And then it really was, and we went 3 more books, and they're going to come out every 6 months. So it was like, okay. That's it. It doesn't always happen that way. And some things take longer than others. So like the Agent and Moose books, they take much longer to do because the drawing takes much longer, because Jess really needs the time. She's doing like the lion's share of the work on that with the illustrating. So I have to get the scripts to her quicker. So I have a short period of time to write, but and the book itself takes much longer because the real work then begins. The illustration work begins. So it's different timelines. There is pressure, but it's also comforting, because there's something about when you're writing a book on spec that nobody may ever buy it. You know, I've spent months of my life on books that will never be on the shelves. And there is something a little bit like, oh, okay, that's never, you know, like, that's just not, it just didn't hit. My agent couldn't sell it. It didn't work. But I spent a lot of time on that. So you kind of, at least if you're writing under contract, you know, it eventually has a home. You're crafting it and you know it has a place to go to. So that's comforting.
And how long does it usually take you to write a book?
It depends a lot. So I would say if you're writing a series, you can get into a rhythm, because it's like you've already got your main characters. So with the zombie goldfish books, there were 6 of those. So by the time you write the first book, you've got your characterization done. You know who your heroes are, you know who your villains are. You might have guest stars. If I think of it like television episodes, I think of it like writing a sitcom. So you have your cast of characters, you have your setting, then you have to think of what are they going to do? This is the episode where they, do X. Yeah. So I've got the zombie goldfish kids, which are like the Scooby-Doo gang. You know what I mean? If you think of like Scooby-Doo cartoon, this is the, you know, there's the gang. There might be a guest villain that they have to foil. And they're, you know, this week they go to the spooky lighthouse, and next week they go to the aquarium and Frankie gets caught in a shark tank. And the next week they go and they're on a camping trip and they have to smuggle Frankie out. So there's the who is consistent. The where sometimes is moving around, and the what happens is different. So you can take less time to do it because you know your characters really well. You can kind of, you know how they're going to say things, you know, you've worked on the dialogue. This character talks like this character talks like this. It comes out easier. It's just the plotting that takes the time. And then even then in a series, sometimes the plotting has to be sort of formulaic because you kind of have to go, well, I need to present the problem. Then they need to have like 3 ways of trying to solve it, but getting it really hilariously wrong. And then they finally need to solve the problem. And then everything's okay. So there is, depending on how your series pans out, there is a formula. With the Agent Moose books, he has to have several plans where he gets in elaborate disguises to try to find out who the criminal is or what's going on, to foil the mystery. But he has to have those ridiculous disguises because that's what the readers expect. They you know, that's the trademark of the character. So I have to stick those in. So there are some plot points that are kind of set, and then other things that you can play with and weave around. So it can take anywhere from 3 months to 6 months to depending on the book.
What is your writing process like?
At the beginning of the writing process, I'm a notebook girl. I have lots of notebooks, and I make notes about things, and I scribble, and I go and sit outside, and I take walks, and I have thinking time, and I scroll through the internet, and I find pictures of people or places or whatever that I think are right, and sometimes cut them out or print them out. And I don't quite make a mood board. I know some authors that do that make a proper mood board, like with images and stuff, but I kind of have them stuck in my notebook. So I'll have like photographs or drawings or images stuck in my notebook to help me, just as like an aid memoir for writing. And then at some point I'll start to write. And sometimes I start at the beginning, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I start at like the main action because that's what I've thought of. And then I kind of go back and think, well, where am I going to begin this? And am I going to begin this when he finds out and he gets the letter? Or am I going to begin this when he opens the door to the villain? Or am I going to begin that, like, so I do the main action bit first, and then I kind of backtrack a little bit. But it depends on the book. It depends what happens. If it's the first book in a series and I'm trying to explore the characters, then it's messier. So there's a lot more scribbling out and going, and some characters just get completely deleted, or they get merged, or they start off as a boy and they become a girl, or they start off as an anteater and they become a squirrel, or you don't know, you know, like they're different. Yeah, so it's I think for each book it's a different process. For Agent Moose, it was very much creating the characters, and then creating funny scenes between Agent Moose and Alfred, and then going back and linking them together and making it more like a film script, so that there were proper scenes and transitions and stuff. But I didn't write it like in order. I wrote like that bit and that bit and that bit, and then I went back and filled in bits.
Is your writing influenced by your acting experience?
Yes, very much so. I think so. I was talking about this to other writers at conferences, and I've talked to kids about this when I do creative writing classes with kids. I think because I was an actor for so long, I explore things by getting into character. So if I don't know my character really well, I can't write. Like, I know people that write about a place, or I know people that write about a plot first. They come up with like, oh, let's do this kidnap plot and we'll do this, or oh my God, that beach is amazing, let's set a story there. I have to have the character like really solidly in my head, and I have to have their voice. And I do a lot of free writing, pretending to be that character, like writing monologues as that character. even if the book isn't going to be in first person and I'm not going to say, oh, and then I did this and I did that, I still kind of have to write as if I was that character to figure out who they are. And I think that's an acting thing. I think that's just the way that my brain works to get into it. And that's the only way I know how to get into the character. I can't like be the omniscient person and look down and go, you're doing this and you're doing this and you're doing this. I have to kind of do it from the point of view of one of the people in the scene and figure it out from there. Yeah, that's definitely an acting throwback.
You mentioned in one of the interviews that you're a kinesthetic learner. How does it affect your attitude towards the writing?
I think that's why I'm a notebook person, because the actual act of writing does something to me. It sticks it in my brain, the act of writing it down. So I am the person that has to take notes, even if I'm like going to a lecture and it's recorded and I know I can watch it later, I still have to take notes because I won't remember the thing that she said unless I write it down. And that's just the act of writing does it. So there's something about the way, I can look at a thing and go, oh, I can put that piece of IKEA furniture together from this diagram. I have to sit with the stuff in front of me and balance the thing and put it in that side and wiggle it and then once I've done that, I can make 10 of them easily. But you can't just show me a piece of paper and then I can figure it out. I have to learn by doing and touching and wrenching it around. And yeah, and I think that does. I walk around when I'm writing. I pick stuff up. I go for walks outside. I've like climbed a tree to see. I was setting this scene in one of the zombie goldfish books where they're being chased by this panther and they climb a tree to get away from them. And I was like, I haven't climbed a tree since I was like 10. I should really climb a tree and remember what that feels like. So I climbed a tree. I was like, but I'm glad I did, because there was all kinds of stuff that like I had forgotten, how the feel of the bark on your, you get brush burn if you slip, and moss on the tree makes it slippery, and just how it feels when you're up there and someone could walk under you and not know that you're there. And yeah, so I'm a big person who kind of has to actually do and explore to learn about it. So when there was one of the books that was set like at the British Museum, I had to go and walk amongst the mummies and look at things and feel, yeah, I kind of have to get into it in order to get into it. I have to physically explore things. But I think that comes across in my writing too, because I don't always talk about just how something looks. If I'm describing a scene, I have to talk about how it feels. And so I think that makes my description sometimes more 3D, because it's not just maybe, then I have to throw in what it sounds like or whatever as well. But it's not just what it looks like. It's like what it feels like. It's rough, it's cold, it's smooth, it's whatever. That's important to me. So yeah, it's just peculiar ways that your brain work, right?
How much plotting do you do before you start drafting more?
I do more plotting now than I used to. And that's because I've learned over the years that it's easier if you do more plotting. So I used to be like, in writing terms, they always say, oh, are you a pantser or a plotter? Like a pantser meaning by like fly by the seat of your pants. And I was definitely more of a pantser. I would just like start an idea and go in, but I would go down so many wrong pathways. That's fine if you've got a year to write your book, or you've got to, if you can explore and you're not under contract. But once you're like, no, I got to deliver this book in 4 months or 6 months, you kind of don't have time to go wrong so much. so it just helped with the craft of it. It just helped to make it, I took fewer wrong turns. If I plotted it out more precisely, and I still left room. And if I disagreed with something as I went along, I still kind of switched things around and changed things. But if I knew what the framework was, the skeleton was going in, then I made fewer mistakes, and I wasted less time. So I think it was a very practical move. And I know that there's lots of people that say, oh, that kills your creativity. And I think it is a trade-off, because you do, if you can just explore it and dump on a page and try different things, well, that is freer. and you probably will come up with different things. And if you have a couple of years to write your book, that's fantastic, and do that. But if your editor is breathing down your neck and going, we got to get this done, sometimes it helps you to plan it more. So I've kind of grown into a planner. I feel like I've grown up. I feel like that's the one aspect that I've grown up. I'm good. Oh, I'm more of a planner now. Yeah.
Do you read the manuscript out loud?
Always. And I think that's another acting thing. I think with dialogue, it pulls up all the flaws if you read it out loud. Descriptions as well. I mean, your whole book, you should read it out loud, but definitely if you're writing dialogue scenes, you have to, because you'll realize that, like, oh, those two characters sound too similar. There's not enough of a difference between them. What can I do in the word choice or the pacing or the syntax or whatever that to make that dialogue distinct? And also sometimes you just find that something trips, and give it to someone else to read too. Because I find I grew up in America, so I'm American, and my accent means that sometimes, even if I'm writing with like a British voice in mind, it's not right. Like, it's not exactly right. There's still like a little American nuance to it. And if a British person reads it, sometimes they go, why would you say that? Like that, it just doesn't kind of work. But in my American accent, it sounds right. So I think sometimes as well, having someone else read your work out loud and you listening to it. My critique group does that, and it's great. I belong to a critique group. We used to meet in person, but now we meet online, and we meet up once a month, and we like read a chapter of our work in progress to each other. And there's about usually 5 or 6 of us, and but we don't read our own stuff. Like, you know, I would read yours and you would read someone else's and they would read that person's, so that you get to sit there and hear your work read by someone else. And it really pulls up where the problems are. Like, there's stuff that you just go, oh man, that's bad. Okay. That's like, that didn't work. All right. That section's too long. That's whatever. But you can't compensate in your own pacing or your own, like, I know how I want it to sound, so I try to make it sound like that. I can kind of compensate with my performance for a slightly faulty script. But if someone else is reading it, they don't know. So I think that's a really good tip for critique groups. Don't read out your own work. Get someone else to read your work, because hearing your own work is, I mean, can be painful if it's not very good at the time. It's a work in progress, but it's really, really helpful. Really helpful. Yeah. Good tip.
How do you pick when to be funny and when to sacrifice a joke because it ruins the run-up to a bigger payoff?
So usually, because my editor tells me to, usually I try to throw in too many jokes, and then they go, no, see, you don't need that. And I'll be like, no, but I really like it because the seagull and that. And they're like, no, you just, no. And then I try to sneak it in somewhere else sometimes. And they go, no, you tried to sneak in the seagull. No, just no. Okay. So usually a grown-up tells me not to, is the short answer to that. But sometimes I can see it. I do see it. Like, you have to, a joke is a plot. It has a 3-arc system, like a play does. You have, your introduction, you have your setup, and you have your payoff, and you need all those parts of the joke for it to work. So if putting the joke in there slows things down, you're being chased by the villain. Well, your hero could throw in a quick quip, but they couldn't throw in like here's a setup, here's a thing, and then here's a payoff. While they're being chased, it could slow down the action sometimes. So usually that's when the joke gets sacrificed, is because it's an action point, or it's an emotionally climactic point, and I'm trying to kind of throw a joke in, and the editor goes, no, we're we're concentrating on the fact that he's upset about his dad. Why is he making a joke? I'm like, oh, but it's funny. It's about the. So yeah, it's either because it's slowing things down. You're having an aside, but it doesn't help anything. It doesn't further the plot, or it distracts from something that we're trying to do with the character. Like, a nice emotional moment that we don't want to be ruined by a joke that isn't necessary. so those are usually the choices that you have to make. Yeah.
What's a punch-up draft?
Oh, that's where you just go through, people in movie scripts get paid a lot of money to do this. You just go through and put more jokes in. So it just means you've got your plot set, you've got your characterization set, you know what everything's going, and there are jokes in there and it's funny. There are situational jokes, but you want to punch it up. You just want to make it a little bit more funny. So like in a script, like in a sitcom script, they would go for like one joke a page, right? So there should be one funny thing that happens, you know, every single time, every single page that you're on, there should be something happening. So the laughs go but constantly. But it doesn't start out that way. So you have to make sure everything else is right. So you get your characterizations right, you get your character arcs there, you get your plot arcs going, you have your subplot going, you have all that in place. And then one of the last things you do is go back and go, where are there opportunities for me to stick in another joke? Where, you know, where are the little moments where it just drops a bit? And again, like you don't want to stick in a joke in the middle of the chase scene or the middle of the climactic reveal with the dad or something. But there will be times when you can go, yeah, that needs something, it needs something there. And you're just punching in jokes where there are gaps. And then when you read the whole thing through again, there's no dud moments. You know, like if you think of it as a sitcom, it's really easiest to envision. If you think of it as like a half an hour sitcom, that there should be dramatic moments, and there should be, you know, maybe where you're holding your breath, or where there's a chase scene and a bit of action, or, you know, somebody chasing down the stairs or something. But there has to be enough jokes that you're never sitting there not laughing at all. You know, that it has to be constant. So, and that's hard sometimes, because you think like, I'm done now, like I can't do that. But yeah, it's a useful thing to do when you're writing comedy, is have that final pass through, because there will be moments that you could stick in another joke. Yeah.
Is it possible to learn how to be funny?
I think it's possible to learn comedy techniques, and it's possible to open yourself up. I think a lot of people, it isn't that they're not funny, but they censor themselves. I think a lot of people think up something and then don't think they can put it down, because they think, oh no, that's stupid, or that's not clever enough, or that's whatever. And we're all like judging ourselves and censoring ourselves. And so one of the best things I say to writers is take an improv course, especially writers who want to write comedy. You should take an improv course, whether it's an online course or an in-person course or whatever, because improv teaches you to say yes and. So one of the first things you learn in improv is somebody makes you an offer. So we'd be talking, and I'd be like, oh hi, here's a coconut. And if you say, well, that's not a coconut, that's a pen, well, then you've just blocked the entire scene. But if you say, oh, thanks for the coconut, actually, I'm really allergic to coconuts, and now I'm blowing up to the size of a watermelon, and whatever. Or so it's like, yes, and yes. And, oh, and I needed this coconut because I'm making instruments out of coconuts, or yes, and I needed. So instead of censoring yourself, when your brain thinks, oh, what about putting a coconut in there? Say yes, and what else can I do with that coconut? Yes, and that coconut could fall on somebody's head. Yes, and it could roll away and do this. Yes, and it, you know, what are the possibilities? And I think for a lot of people, if you stop censoring yourself, the comedy comes more freely. So first thing, take an improv course, or just look up some improv, watch improv on TV, get that in your head about accepting and not blocking. Yes, and yes, and the other is think in, there are formulas to things. Think in threes. There's, you know, the bird poops here and you step away from it. The bird poops here and you step away from it. And just when you're feeling like that's not going to get me, it falls on your head. It wouldn't be as funny if it just fell on your head. You have to successfully get away from it twice and think, I'm good. Then it gets you. So there are systems that make it funnier. And if you know the setups, and if you know that, then it's easier to write it. Yeah. So you can learn to be funnier. And you can learn to be confident in trying to be funny. Because what's the worst that can happen? So.
How do you tackle edits?
It's hard. It depends what the edit's for. Sometimes an edit is literally to get the word count down, because the publisher wants a book that's a certain size. This is like 20-some thousand words, and all the other books in this series are about this size, and if I suddenly did a J.K. Rowling and turned in one that was 3 times the size, they'd be like, no, that's not what our readers want. That's not what. So sometimes you are just kind of going, oh yeah, I've just really got to get the word count down. And then you're just slash and burn. You're going through. And sometimes editing, then there's different edits. There's like my friend Sarah Grant, who's an author, does amazing courses on editing. And she talks about doing your macro edits and your micro edits, right? Now a lot of writers get obsessed with the micro edits first. And you go, oh, I'm going to craft this sentence till it's a beautiful sentence and it's absolutely precise and every word in this sentence is perfect. But you haven't dealt with the fact that that character is unnecessary. You could probably cut that entire chapter, and this sub arc just isn't working. So what are you going to do about it? So you have to kind of do all your macro stuff first and then spend the time on the little stuff. So it's really and that's not always what you want to do. Like as a writer, my instinct is like, no, and I want to make this little bit just perfect. And I want to make this little bit just perfect. And then that whole chapter might be cut and you might have spent days making that chapter perfect just to cut it, to go, but we're not going to start the story there. We're going to start it here. So think about macro edits and be ruthless, but get help. I think it's really hard if you're self-publishing or you're doing stuff yourself, that it's only your voice in your head doing it. I really value the outside worth of an editor to come in and tell me, no, you think you're conveying this, but you're not. It's because it's in here and you're imagining it on the page and it's not actually on the page. So I think it's worth, if anybody is self-publishing and stuff, pay to get an editor. Just budget that you're going to get an editor to look at your work and it'll make your work 10 times better. I think we all need the outside eye. Nobody is that good that they that they can do it all themselves. And yeah, but my main advice for editing is do the big stuff and then work your way down, macro to micro. Yeah, that's
a great advice. Mo, can you share your favorite editorial note?
It's funny, when I do workshops with kids, I always say, when I was an actor, one of the notes you get from directors is show, don't tell. Don't tell us I'm angry. Now you show that you're angry, right? And that's exactly the same note you get from editors a lot. It's like, well, you're telling us that she's angry, instead of having her come into the room and throw her book bag on the floor and slump down and go, I hate school. Just tell, you don't go, oh, she angrily did this, or adverbs are not your friend generally. You don't need to use adverbs. Instead of saying she angrily walked into the room, she stomped into the room, she stormed into the room, that kind of, there's enough brilliant action words out there. So that's probably one that we all get, because we all get lazy. So I get that. I've probably had some, just random ones that you get, please don't put the pigeon in this scene, or just random things that will mean nothing to nobody, but I go, oh yeah, that's or he can't, because a lot of them are ridiculous animal things. So it's like, an anteater's tongue is however many feet long they could reach that, so you can't make it, it's not out of reach for him to get, or it's like, okay. So my plot point doesn't work because he could get out of that. Okay. So I think most of them are probably ridiculous animal comments from editors. Yeah.
How closely does the finished novel resemble your very first draft?
You probably wouldn't recognize it. very, very different. It can be really different. Your first draft could be, sometimes I go from like first person to third person, so everything's rewritten. Sometimes whole characters are gone. Sometimes the characters are aged up or aged down. You know, I could start off something going, well, I want this character to be 7, and then as I'm writing the book, I'm thinking, no, they need to be able to do different things, so I'm going to make them like 9 or 10 because they need to be able to do this. Or yeah, like I said, whole characters disappear. Sometimes you have a character and they're just too convenient, and your character doesn't need to do for themselves because they've got this extra person there. So you get rid of the parent or the grandparent or whatever, because yeah, they're too easy to help. So I would say maybe probably like a third of my first draft is in the real book. So it's definitely recognizable, but not in the form that you would. Yeah. There are nuggets, there'll be little bits, and sometimes a whole scene. I could come up with a whole scene and that scene will be in there, like the scene with Frankie being shocked back to life. In my first draft, there is that scene is there, and actually a lot of the first 2 chapters is there, but a lot of the rest of it changed. So sometimes there are nuggets that just stay, they come out right, and then you just keep them.
And Ma, what's the difference between writing chapter books, picture books, and graphic novels?
So graphic novels is the biggest change for me, but it was also interesting because it was like going back. So in a chapter book, you write a manuscript. So it's paragraphs and there are some illustrations, but the illustrations are kind of decided at the end, and you don't do that. Like the art director and the editor decide which bits need to be illustrated. And by the time I was writing a few books in and I got to know Marek, who's the illustrator, I would think, oh, I know exactly what they're going to do here. He's going to have this, because like we got to know each other. But you're not involved in that at all. In the graphic novel, you kind of have to think of it like a film script. So you have to know that, I mean, you're not giving any description. So you're writing it like a script. You're writing like, you know, scene 1, Agent Moose's office. He's surrounded by newspapers and banging his head on the desk saying, oh no, I'll be the laughing moose of the forest. And then, you know, enter so-and-so who says this. So it's really written out like a script. And then the pictures have to tell the story. So you can't like hog it. You can't hog the story as the writer. You have to let the illustrator tell the story, because they're gonna add 10 times more into it. So you're kind of writing the skeleton of it, and you know you have to have the funny. You have to be like the words have to be funny, but you also have to give scope for visual humor. So when I'm writing something, if I'm like, Agent Moose is dressed as a palm tree, well then I have to write something that's going to be funny for Jess to illustrate. Like, so she has him dressed as a palm tree, and then this parrot sits on him, and he's like, no, you're going to blow my cover, da 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 da. And you know, it's got to be, you've got to allow that difference. And there's also like if you think of it like a film script as well, like there's close-ups, there's pan backs. So in the start of each chapter is like an establishing shot. So they're like so the start of the first chapter is like it's a scene that shows the Woodland HQ, and then the start of like the second chapter is them heading off to the next place. So they tend to have like a 1-page spread at the start of the chapter that sets the scene, shows where we're going or what's happening. Sometimes it's a funny reveal, but that's a kind of pattern. So you have to think in that. And then throughout there might be like close-up shots or chase scenes or whatever. So you have to think of how it's going to visually pan out. I mean, obviously the art director and the illustrator are doing all that, but you have to think of that. And then a picture book is more like, again, it's more like writing a script, because you have to think of each page turn as a, and then it's a reveal. So every page turn should be something exciting. something that the kid's discovering. It's like a discovery. If each page turn is a discovery, that's the way to look at it. So your picture book is 12 discoveries. It's 12 times. Yeah. And that has to build to something. So it's individual discoveries that are building to a big discovery near the end, or but each one has to be a discovery. So you have to think in that way. So picture books take more time to write, but less time to write, because they're quite often only 200, 400 words, 500 words, but you don't have time for any wasted words. So every single thing that's on that page has to be important, and everything has to lead you to the next page, which has to lead you to the next page. So it's a different it's a different skill set. I think I'm still too wordy in my picture books. I have a new picture book coming out this year, and I think I finally got the word count down, and I got it to be almost like a poem that's telling a story and it's leading through things. I tend to write wordier picture books, so I need to. That's a learning thing for me. I have too much I'm trying to shove in. Yeah.
And how do you work with the illustrators?
Well, we don't. I mean, at the early stage, you don't. So like, well, for a picture book, I kind of just turn in my text to the publisher. The publisher picks an illustrator, and they say, oh, this illustrator would really suit the text. And then they put them together and they lay them out and everything. The illustrator and the art director work together with the editor to lay out the pages. And I get to look at them and comment, but I don't, that's kind of, unless there's something that's actually contradictory or wrong or whatever, then you're kind of letting them tell their story too. So having to do that. But I think it's much more of their job is so much harder. The illustrator's job, I think, that because they're just telling the story visually, and they have to do, but I feel like I'm just cheating. I'm just writing the words. Someone else is doing all the hard graft.
How do you come up with book titles?
Oh, well, quite often it's not the author who comes up with the book titles. So we could, like, so for Agent Moose, I thought it was going to be called Anonymous. And then they decided, so oftentimes the publishers will talk to booksellers. And if they talk to like Barnes and Noble and Waterstones and they say, we don't like that title, they'll quite often change the title. So Agent Moose was because they thought it was a more accessible title. It says what it was. He's an agent, he's a moose, he's a secret thing. So Agent Moose came across like that. My Big Fat Zombie Goldfish was the title from the beginning. I think that was kind of iconic. What are the other ones? Romeosaurus and Juliet Rex was Romeosaurus and Juliet Rex because it couldn't be anything else. Sometimes it's really obvious. And then for the Zombie Goldfish books, they all had like a bad pun. So there was Any Fin is Possible, Jurassic Carp was about one, Live and Let Swim was a kind of James Bondy one. So they all, we kind of set up a theme that every book had a bad pun. And then we just kind of came up with as many fish puns as we could to try to fit them in. But so sometimes your editor and you will brainstorm, or your agent, or you'll talk to friends and go, right, what are, a title can be really complicated, but they do ask the booksellers what their opinion is too. Because if a bookseller hates the title, if you can't get your book in Barnes and Noble or Waterstones because they can't stand the title, then you're kind of sabotaging the sales of your book. So it's a commercial decision as much as anything else.
What advice would you give to an author who has never done a school visit before and doesn't know any teachers or has any school connections? Like, how do you make that first appearance happen?
I would say the first thing is to find your local bookshop and go to your local bookshop and tell them that you are a local author and this is my book, and give them a copy of your book. And if they don't stock it, and then say, be knowledgeable about what age range you want to work with. So if your book is a gritty, you know, urban fiction, then don't say, oh, I'm going to go in and do storytelling with your, you know, young kids. Pitch it, know what you're pitching, and don't say I can do everything, because very few people can do everything, and it just makes teachers think you don't know what you're talking about. So so be specific. If you have picture books, say I'm going to go in and I'm going to do storytelling with my picture book with your nursery or your reception class or your year 1 or year 2. If you want to go in and do, if you've got like a Agent Moose or a Zombie Goldfish book, you can go in and say, you know, yes, I want to go into your first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade. I'm going to be, you know, talking about, and then you prepare what you're going to do. So you should have in your back pocket a presentation that you could do at an assembly, and the presentation should be inspiring and fun, and, you know, half an hour to 45 minutes, and, you know, interactive. Kind of make sure that you have interactive elements in it so that you could do like a quiz. You could have a PowerPoint where you're revealing things. In the Agent Moose one, I have a mystery. So I have clues on the PowerPoint that they've got to spot, and then they see if they get the clue right, if they can spot what's wrong in the picture, and then they go on to the next clue. So interactive elements. In the Zombie Goldfish one, I had got the kids, this was before COVID, got kids up on stage and dressed up as characters. And especially got teachers dressed up as characters on stage. You know, school kids love that. With the little kids, it's more storytelling, song, if you can sing or play an instrument or something. So I do ukulele. So for Romeosaurus and Juliet Rex, I bring my friend here into the schools. Props are great for little kids. Honestly, you can't go into school without some decent props. So he's Sir Tooth-a-Lot, and he comes with me. And I play I have the Romeosaurus and Juliet Rex song. And then it's also good for little kids to have a craft element. So I have some coloring sheets that they can do, how to draw a dinosaur. So you use shapes to, you know, a triangle on top of a square with a circle, and this makes a dinosaur kind of thing. I get them to draw little masks. So having thinking up for an assembly presentation, for little kids, you want a craft, you want some kind of song or repetition, and you want interactive elements, and you want to read your story. If it's a picture book, you should be reading it in its entirety to the kids, right? The whole thing. Don't just tease, read the whole thing. If you're doing an assembly and it's for a fiction book, you should just do like a 2-minute reading. Like some authors stand there and read for 8 minutes. It's really boring. Don't do that. Like 2-minute reading. Yeah. Pick an exciting bit of your book and read like 2 minutes of it. And sometimes you can do 2 of those throughout an assembly. You could do one at the beginning, and then you could do a bunch of interactive stuff. And then you could do another one just before the end and go, ooh, and dun, 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 what's going to happen next? But there's lots of tricks, and there's lots of events. I do a whole SCBWI workshop on events and how to plan events and how to organize school events. In order to get the event, go to your local bookshop, tell them that you do it, give them a printout or email them a thing saying, this is what I do. Hi, I'm Mo O'Hara. I can offer you my Zombie Goldfish workshop, my Romeosaurus and Juliet Rex picture book thing, or my Agent Moose mystery solving. Boom. Here's what I offer. This one's 30 minutes. This one's 45 minutes. This one, you know, and then you look professional. You know what you're talking about. You've got your age range sorted. And then the bookshop can recommend you to local schools and teachers. It also really helps to have a short video that you can put up on YouTube. Again, this time, if you're a picture book person, don't read your entire picture book and put it on YouTube. Publishers don't like that, but read a bit of it and maybe do a craft thing. So I've got a picture, I've got a couple of videos on YouTube that anyone can search and watch. There's one that I do for Thanksgiving where I make a hand turkey. There's another where I do a Halloween poem for kids. There's, you know, so you can pick a holiday thing to do and put it up on YouTube. And then if a school wants to see an example of your work, you can say, well, I have these short videos on YouTube and some of them might be a good lesson starter for you. You could make a Halloween poem, or you could do this craft thing. And then the bookshop can see, oh, you can speak well and you're not flustered and it's okay. It's like a little audition tape, right? So you have to think of it like that. They're putting you in front of an audience, so they want to know that you're safe pair of hands, that you're professional and you know what you're talking about. And if you just come in and say, hi, I'm a local author and I've written a book and I think I could talk to anyone between the age of 5 and 20 about it, they'll go, uh-huh, You don't know what you're talking about. So be specific, do your research, and just ask around. Like if you have friends that have kids, ask them if you can go into their school. If you have, friends that are teachers or whatever, just try to make contact. It is harder in COVID times. It is harder. That you can't just walk up, and most schools you can't just walk up to them anyway. You have to make contact. But bookshops are a really good place to start, because schools ask bookshops for recommendations of who they should get. So it's a good start. I could go on about this for 8 days.
Any disaster stories or funny things that have gone wrong?
Yes. So sometimes school visits can be absolutely amazing. Sometimes but it doesn't always go to plan. So one of the worst school visits I had was, it was in London, and I went to the school, and everything had been planned in advance. And I, normally, you do have to kind of follow up and say, I'm confirming I'm coming on this day. I'm confirming I need this, blah, blah, blah. And they said, oh, well, we're kind of in a funny situation today because we've double booked. You're in, and we've also got another presentation that's happening simultaneously, but that's fine because we've got a downstairs hall and an upstairs hall. It's like a big Victorian school building. So you'll be in the upstairs hall, and there'll be the other presentation in the downstairs hall. And I went, okay. And they said, and we've given the kids the choice as to which presentation they want to attend. I went, okay, so what am I up against? The people that are doing guide dog training for puppies. So the children were told, do you want to go see the author, or do you want to go see like half a dozen cute, fluffy, noble puppies that are training to do this noble thing and be guide dogs? I had about 10 kids, right? Everyone else was down with the puppies. I wanted to be down with the puppies. And the worst thing was that at certain points in my presentation, when they would be really quiet, you could just hear downstairs everyone going, oh, 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 again. So like, never go up against puppies. That's all I can say. Like, never. Yeah. You will never win. You will never win. Cute puppies win the day. So darn those puppies. So
That's a hilarious story. Ma, is there anything else you would like to talk about?
No, I think it was great. I love the way that you talked about, because I could talk about school visits and Tough for Ages, and I could talk about the importance of SCBWI and groups like that for networking, and crit groups to have them, have that support group, but also have that helping you get better at your craft. So I think those are really the points I wanted to make. Like, writing can be such a solitary job. Anything you can do to broaden your network, to give you those, author, illustrator, editor, agent friends that you can connect with and feel like you can unburden yourself when you've had a stressful day, you got a rejection, all that kind of stuff. That happens all the time. You really need that network around you. So having those crit groups, having some organization like SCBWI is just great. I just booked a retreat, my first retreat in like 3 years. I'm going away on a picture book retreat this summer with SCBWI, and I'm just so excited to be like away in a country house for 3 days, just talking picture books with other writers and illustrators. I'm just like, oh, it's my happy place. I'm so excited. So give yourself that, those creative moments. That's all I can say.
Thank you so much, Mo.
Oh, no, thank you. This has been really, really fun. Thank you so much. I have had an absolute blast. Good luck with everything. And I hope, yeah, people find it interesting to hear how my strange brain works, but never mind.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure and honor to talk to you. So
oh, no, it's been great. Thank you. Thank you for asking me. Thank you for asking me. Take care.
Bye. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You as well. You as well.